Okay. So apparently we are live. There we are. Oh, what's wrong with this focus? Hello, Sebastian. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Hi, Adam. Yes.
Testing 1, 2, 3.
Yeah,
How are you?
Can you hear me?
Yeah. So we're starting a little early just to test things out and see if others join in for the discussion. But I was very excited to hear that you're using event modeling for non-events driven systems. So
Yeah. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah.
So it was a couple of times that I wanted to join the meetup, and every time it was a bit.
Yeah,
so
it's a
I'm
little
a father of a young daughter, and it's yeah.
What time zone are you in?
European, so GMT +1, I think it's
+1. Okay.
Yeah. So 1930 is a good time, and so it's perfect. So after having after having my normal day job, I can do it then, and
take care of a young daughter. That's you have a lot of energy.
We had some time here, but now she has to go out here.
Yeah,
she's 3 years old, and yeah.
Oh yeah, that's a exciting time. They're starting to become better behaved, which is nice.
I'm a bit nervous. I was never on any podcast or anywhere, so.
You shouldn't be nervous. It's just like anything else. It's really about sharing your experiences and your successes with others. So, and also a good chance so people know about you and your company, and start to maybe learn from you. From your adventures to see how they can apply. So, yeah, it's very informal. I really don't have a script. I generally just want people to talk about whatever they like and discuss things. And to make it easier, I'm going to usually invite some people from our company, like people from the workshops, so that there's lots of people talking. It's not just 100% you. You're not on the spot all the time. But it's nice to have a guest that has some experience with all of this stuff, because a lot of the people out there, most people out there, are new to this, and they don't even know where to start. So you're way farther ahead than most people, and at least with this approach. And so
maybe. So I'm still learning, and I'm for sure not doing anything correctly. But as long as it helps, and as long as it brings value to the whole team and me, so I think we're on the right track.
Yeah. Well, we have about 15 minutes. Hello, Steven.
Good morning.
Steven's going to join us.
Good afternoon, good evening. Not sure.
Hi.
Steven's been a regular now this year. He's been on all of the podcasts and meetups. So it's nice to have someone help out, which is takes a little bit off of me, because last year was just me the whole year.
Okay. So
that was a lot of work. Twice a week, usually 2 hours, sometimes 4 for each one. So that was a lot of hours every week. And this is a new format, so it's less visual, more of a discussion, so people can listen to it. And then Friday it's back to the regular format of a meetup, where we have more demonstrations and visual walkthroughs, modeling, all sorts of stuff. So code, architecture. Yeah,
cool.
Yeah, so I let some other people in. Let's see. Mostly it's just an audience, if there is some questions from the audience, but we're going to try and focus on the topic of using event modeling for traditional systems, and that event-driven mindset that allows us to not get stuck on the details of the tables and whatever else you might have underneath the implementation. So, Stephen, how was your weekend?
It was good. We went up to Chilliwack yesterday and walked around.
Oh, no more
Our
floods?
drive to the east of Vancouver.
All the floods have gone away?
Yeah, it's pretty wet, but
Still?
a lot of birds, making the birds really happy. Saw a bunch of swans and white geese.
Nice.
Yeah. How about you? It was kind of a cold day.
Where do you go for when you want to go on a trip on weekends in Vancouver?
Yeah, well, there's quite a few options. You can't go south right now because the borders are closed. But you drive east, the valley goes out for about 100 kilometers to the east, and there's like tons of hikes and trails and rivers and just. I've been here for 5 years now, and we still haven't gone to every park. It's just always discovering.
There's lots. When we moved here, my dad took us to try and see every single thing as well.
And you got to do it both seasons too. Like we're like, oh, we got to come back to this place in summer to see how it changes because all the trees will.
But then you don't get to see another thing, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there's tons.
Sorry, Adam.
There's tons to see here. There's what's it called? If you think about British Columbia as a giant park, because there's so many forests, it's 3 times the size of Poland, just British Columbia. So if you can think of how many parks can fit in that area.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
I wish I could make my holidays there someday, but
one day when the little one is when COVID is over and the little one's a little bit older.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, without COVID, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of Europeans that travel here for just being able to get away into an environment that's no cities. There's places probably in British Columbia where you could set foot where no person in history has ever put their foot down, which is quite amazing to
really
think about.
Yeah. We don't have that here in Germany. Every place, wherever you go, it really doesn't matter. There's always a person. So.
Oh yeah, well, Europe is thousands and thousands of years of dense population, so you would figure that most places have been explored. But I don't have the time to explore as much as I would like to. We used to, like I said, with my father when we emigrated. He used to make sure that every weekend we were kind of like what Steven's doing with his family. He's every weekend he has new photos from some beach on some river, lake, or ocean. So he's taking full advantage of being in British Columbia.
You work all the weekends then?
Well, that's not, yeah. I mean, I have to take care of my son and the garden and things like that. But yeah.
He's not
other than that,
hiking.
Work, I guess.
He's not interested. He's not in the age of being interested into hiking or.
No, my son is actually. He's 14, so he's a naturalist. He wants to be a zoologist and environmental studies and all this, sciences. He likes that kind of stuff. So British Columbia is a pretty good place for him to grow up, and he's actually the one that drags me out to the forest to find things, and now he's getting into photography. So yeah, really good place to encourage that. So I'm always yesterday we went outside in the dark to do open shutter photography for traffic light, the lights on the cars, that kind of stuff. So he's really getting into photography and all the stuff you can do with a camera. Luckily that's a hobby of mine that's unfortunately not as used these days, but I still have a couple of camera bodies and a lot of lenses for him to choose and pick from. So it's nice to be able to give your kids something of interest that you had as well. Yeah,
cool. Yeah, we bought a camera when when my daughter was born. So
everyone does.
yeah, that's of course.
So you started to have to take a lot of photos because
of course,
baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got into unfortunately when my son was born, 14 years ago, there was that shift between film and digital. Good quality digital was very, very expensive, and film was kind of on the way out. So there was this era of just people holding the small portable cameras. That's it. To actually have something nice in the house wasn't that doable. But then in 2011, I got into the smaller mirrorless cameras since they got rid of the DSLR body, which is quite large, and made interchangeable lens pocket cameras again because they could get rid of that large mirror mechanism in a professional camera and just go straight to the sensor with interchangeable lenses. So that was 2011. I think Martin Fowler has the same camera. He started to get into the same kind of stuff. I remember at the conferences, he would always he would do his keynote, and then if the weather was nice, he would leave the conference, especially in Vancouver. It's so scenic. We got some sun. He would take the camera and just walk around. So I think he was also using the Sony, the same one that I use, or at least one of the models above or below, I forget. But yeah, back in those days, 2012, 2011, something like that. I forget when the last time he was here. I used to run the Agile Vancouver. Well, not run it, but on the board of the Agile Vancouver meetup. There used to be quite a bit of conferences. Maybe we'd do one or two a year, and inviting the technical people was always fun. So I got Eric Evans here and Martin Fowler and Michael Feathers. A lot of good people from the industry on the technical side of Agile, which was always my mission to always get, instead of just the sprint planning and things like that. It was always let's get some of the tooling represented, because I found the whole Agile part was always moving towards the soft skills like team management and hiring practices and backlog grooming, all these things that weren't technical. So I always wanted to make sure that we had someone representing test-driven development, and someone representing domain-driven design, someone representing architecture. And it was really nice. I ended up hanging out a lot with Eric Evans back in those days, because he used to be at almost all of them. And I think we also made special events when he was in town. We would put on a special meetup so he could give a lecture in one of the evenings that he was in town. So last year, Stephen, he was here, not last year, the year before. So just over a year ago, he was at our office. Eric Evans.
It feels like yesterday, but I can't believe it was 2019. It's crazy.
Yeah, the time has just flown by. But he was nice enough to stop by and say hi to the guys and sign some books. Yeah,
little photo op.
Yeah,
that's fun. Seemed like a nice guy.
That's the good thing about COVID. Then we have more online.
That's right.
Communication, and then
I agree.
The meetings that you held in person are now more accessible to people like me in Europe, and I would never invested the money to fly over and just be part of a meetup. So
exactly, I totally agree. Before it was quite an ordeal, and the meetups were highly localized. I think the silver lining, the only good part, or one of the few good parts of COVID, is that it's made people connect with communities and areas of the world that they would otherwise not have, and it's making ideas and things like this something that unifies, which is kind of nice, because traditionally humans have had borders, very nationalistic, kind of tribal, old school way of doing things. Now we have ideas as the borders. Now some might think that's worse because of all the political stuff in the U.S., you might say, well, that's really the worst thing that's happened because.
But I think it's just natural to prefer the in-person contact, and just I would also not do so much online as I'm doing now, but now I'm forced to, and there are also some good effects. So
yeah. Okay, Stephen, can you check the stream to see if we're actually live, if it's feeding properly?
We definitely are. There's 2 watching right now. It's been live for about 15
great.
minutes.
I guess I should announce it. Or maybe you can do it. You can announce it and I'll retweet it.
Yeah, I did it in a few places on Twitter, Facebook.
Oh, you already did?
But you just have to
retweet
the
link to the YouTube?
Yep.
Oh, well, thank you.
Yeah. Thinking of the other platforms to tweet out on.
Yeah, like LinkedIn. Did you do LinkedIn?
I have not.
That's a good one.
That is a good one.
I'll retweet if I can find your
tweet.
Yeah, and then maybe if you can and hopefully now that we have a proper episode on the right channel, I'll get the podcast site done up. That shouldn't take too long because I already did the Advanced Tech Media one, so it should be very fast to change it around. Where did you tweet that? Let's see. Here we are. Bedroom Podcast is live. Yes. And I already set up a Twitter account for it and things like this. So
cool.
Let me turn off my So the difference between the Friday and the Monday is on Friday I use OBS because there's more screen shares and things like that. And this is just a podcast, so we're just chatting over Zoom. So I think I think what we're gonna do next time is add Zencaster to be able to record locally, because Zencaster records locally. So in case there's some network hiccups, it's always nice to have that backup. And that way there's a separate MP3, or if you pay for the professional one, there's a WAV file for each person's microphone that's recorded locally. So there's no hiccups at all. Let's see, device. Where are my notifications? I need to turn off my notifications. There it is. Notifications. Do not disturb. Perfect. That'll do that. And I should probably make some more admins.
Hey Adam, what's the Twitter handle for the podcast?
Hey Justin, it's event-driven PC, I think, because there's a 15-character limit for names on Twitter, but I haven't set it up yet, so that's part of the next phase. So probably take care of that today. Why is this? Come on.
And hey, Steve.
Hello.
Can you send me the link to the live feed? I can post it on LinkedIn.
Sure.
Well, the YouTubes?
He
has the YouTube link, isn't it on Twitter? Did you not tweet it on Twitter?
It's on the Twitter and the LinkedIn and
I was actually just looking for it.
Telegram and
it's just it should be in his.
It should be in his feed. Where's Steve? There he is.
I was the first follower of Event Driven Podcast.
Does it actually exist?
Yeah.
Or no, the YouTube you mean, right? Not the Twitter, because I didn't really advertise the Twitter account. But it is there. It just has to be.
Yeah, you search for Event Driven Podcast and it's the first result.
What, really? On Twitter? What good indexing. Holy smokes. I thought there would be some other
Yeah,
you know,
doesn't have
out of left field.
He has 2 followers now, probably you and me. Yeah, need some photos on there eventually.
Yeah, that's great.
There. Posted. Oh yeah.
So hopefully we'll get some. I thought Rob was here. Is he gone now? Oh no, he is here.
Yeah.
Hello,
I'm
everyone.
still here.
Since we're starting
Morton,
off,
how are you? Morton has snuck in here from Norway. How are you doing, Morton? Long time no see.
Fine, thank you.
Yeah, it's been years. I met Morton in Oslo, in the NDC
Yeah.
Oslo 2012.
Yeah, something like that.
9 years ago, almost 8.5 years ago. It's time out I come back there. And actually, I was at NDC Oslo, but it was virtual this year. So I had a presentation there, and it was nice.
It was too expensive for me.
Yeah. I'm surprised the
yeah.
virtual one should have been cheaper because it's, not as much to coordinate. But we are starting now, I guess. So we have a lot of people that can help with questions and all that. But it's my pleasure to introduce Sebastian Bortz. And he's been a practitioner of event modeling and experimenting with event-driven systems. And I think he's in an interesting area right now because the solution isn't event-sourced or event-driven, but the event-driven approach and modeling things around events is proving to be helpful. So maybe we can start off with your background, how you got into all of this, and the company you work for, how your whole, I guess, involvement in your technical career started. Was it a passion? What can you tell us about yourself and the area you live in, the community that you work in?
Yeah, it was definitely was a passion. So I am into computers since I'm a child, and I don't remember when I started to program. So I think it was with PHP in the first place, and then somehow got into .NET, and I pretty soon started with a job, got a job, and learned everything on the job. I convinced my first employer to just take me, and then got into C# and became a .NET developer. And I was the first employee there. And during the next 2 or 3 years, I think, we became 30 people. So somehow, I think I had a positive effect there.
That's great.
And now I'm working for Neustar. Neustar is the name. So that is a custom software development agency, and we're around 1,000 people. With
Wow.
we're having quite a few sub companies for different topics. So I'm an employee of Neustar Mobile Solutions, and we're mainly doing apps. So I did a lot of time. I did Windows 8 and Windows 10 applications and the universal Windows platform stuff. And then somehow that died when they let the phone. So the phone was not supported anymore, and then there were no more jobs and no more projects. So I had to look for something else, and that was a bit of Android development and Flutter development.
So you're talking about Windows Phone going away?
Yeah, Windows Phone. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah.
No, on the platform there, I can't remember what they were called, but all the craze about the tiles on the Windows mobile platform, on their new platform.
Oh, right. They wanted to get it to be similar to Windows 8 or whatever they called it, so you could use your tablet.
I remember the name. Was it Metro Tiles or something like that? But anyways.
Yeah, it was a good system. It made fun to develop for, but they had performance issues all the time. It was really.
Oh, interesting. So they had
really
performance
nice.
issues because most people that were in and around the Windows Phone kind of bandwagon, they really enjoyed it. They never admitted these problems. They were
No, it was
talking about
not
how
bad,
great
but
it is, but they never admitted the issues.
if you have really if you have designers that want to torture you, then
Oh, really?
then it's not really easy to, yeah. So and then somehow I got back to website development with ASP.NET Core, and got really interested into all the DDD stuff and enterprise software patterns, and read some books and read Vaughan Vernon's book. And then it's quite funny. I was convinced that we need to go from an anemic model to a domain model. And on Twitter, I asked Vaughan Vernon, what suggestion do you have convincing my colleague? So he was not into it. And I think it was you that answered event modeling, my answer to everything. And, that's how I got to event modeling, and
So did it help convince or at least show the concepts, or
no?
No, yeah.
No.
Some people are just set in their ways, I guess.
And I don't know if it's that bad. So I was pretty new to all these topics, and just wanted to try and experiment with it in the project. But maybe.
Sorry, just having a little microphone issues here. I knocked my microphone.
But it's a long-running project, and it's not easy to rebuild everything then. So, but I kept I really was interested into event modeling, and was in the first meetups last year sometimes, but I had a hard time understanding it really into the deep levels, really, that I can do a workshop with people with it. So I still had questions,
right.
And but I didn't give up, and was an attendee on the workshop you held in November.
The really large one.
Yeah.
A very large one. I'll never forget that workshop. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Just for the listeners, we had 40 hours of instruction repeated for 2 time zones, which ended up being a crazy 80 hours in 5 days. And so now our workshops are slightly smaller, let's just say. The next one's coming up this week on Thursday and Friday. So if you're interested in experiencing the learning as well, look it up on our site. We'll post the link in the show notes. Yeah, I hopefully you learned some things at that workshop. I don't know if there was one or two.
Of course, yeah. It was
1 or 2 sessions that come to mind that help you the most.
At the first place, I was a bit disappointed that I missed 1 or 2 workshops, and I sat here and was I want to join, and but everything worked then after that, and it was a whole week, so I got a lot of value there, and it brought me to a new level, and so a lot of topics that you teach there were not on my mind before that. So stream design and all these things, and that's really a lot of.
It's kind of funny how people don't think about stream design, and in the traditional sense, they're always thinking of tables and maybe object-oriented classes. It's a totally different mindset, I guess.
Yeah, of course. I have still not much experience with it, so I never did a big project with event sourcing and all those stuff. But I'm still interested, and I hope we get there sometime. And but I really wanted to use event modeling, and my team was a bit skeptic at first, so they didn't see the value. But I did event modeling in the background. I just modeled complex stories that just for myself in order to understand it better, and the right questions pop up in such a model. So just for myself, it is a help to get to the right questions that I can ask to a client. And so just using it for myself alone was a value.
So it brought into, by doing the exercise yourself, even though you didn't have a buy-in from the team, you were able to quickly eliminate the understood parts and focus on the areas that still had questions and were ambiguous, and maybe could have given you a problem later because it wasn't fully thought out in terms of the mechanics, and you could have a dangerous situation where you maybe scheduled some things to do in the sprint, and the sprint would fail because those details that people didn't get into were not addressed, right? So it's kind of being a little bit more thorough, right, about seeing where the information goes,
and lets you see far away. So with a sprint, you only see the next sprint and the next 2 or 3 user stories, and with event modeling you can look ahead of that. And what
Sebastian,
I did,
sorry to cut in. This example that you brought up with your team and the buy-in and the difficulty, I went through the same thing at a previous company. I worked with a pretty good team. It was a great team, but it then came time to do something different. We focused on some, we introduced me and another gentleman in the team introduced different patterns to the group: CQRS, domain-driven design, and event sourcing. We weren't yet familiar with event modeling. That part of the world came after for me. I had a heck of a time trying to train people. I noticed you went ahead on your own, and you just when you mentioned you did the event model yourself for the more complex problems, was that enough to move the needle? It's like, well, wait a second. We would have been spinning our wheels here through all these complex problems, and perhaps we wouldn't have been able to have an adequate solution in a adequate amount of time, or sufficient amount of time to push it over the line. Did that help?
Yeah, I think that was the beginning then, because I used that event model whenever we had questions and meetings about that complex story, and I just showed it on my screen. And we have this case here. What is with that? What is with this edge case here? And the others could see how I think and how I come to that question, and that it makes sense to have that story right in front of you in its whole complexity. And
so that's interesting, because that sounds really good, and I think most people listening already understand that there is event sourcing and event-driven systems and domain-driven design. But the very interesting part about this company is that they're using it with a traditional system and traditional architecture. So the events are only in people's minds. The actual information and how it's written is just traditional tables and traditional architecture, nothing different. Is that correct?
Yeah, of course. It's just so. I had a hard time understanding what you mean with Fred Brooks and his book Mythical Man Month, and it's exactly that. So it's just about showing the information flow. So it's not necessary to have events. If information is in tables, it is in events, it doesn't matter. But somehow I can, in both cases, show what information goes into the system via a view and via a command, and then what is persisted then, and what is in the database, and that does everybody does understand this, and
so it works. That's good.
It works, and so even though I have no events, I have information in a yellow sticky that stands for something that I change in my database. And I started with just the changes. So if I have a table and have one instance of one row, yeah.
Yep.
And if I change only one field of a row, I can show that by just having only that field in the sticky note changing.
Mm-hmm.
So that was one way of doing it. And having all the fields on my tables being shown on an event model, I think that delivers as much value as if you do it with events.
Yeah, I think one of the challenges is I don't think many people realize just kind of how small a community event sourcing and CQRS is, and to try and change the world right away and have everyone understand the way that the advantages of having traceability by having events and all that. That's wonderful, but most of the world, 99% of the world is these traditional table-based state is only now type of approaches, the 3-layer cake architecture. So it's really important to not be in the echo chamber and have our tooling support both equally, but also allow people to use that tool to see the advantages and disadvantages and the trade-offs from using one approach versus another, because maybe there is a company that wants to have one system to be event sourced, but they don't have the option with the other teams to be event sourced, and they have to have a traditional architecture there. I think, when you're talking about the changes and the specific table rows and columns that you're changing and being able to cross-reference them with different parts of the workflow, what we're getting into is an interesting universal problem and aspect of information systems and programming, and that's the coupling problem. So I'm guessing what your yellow stickies, when you're using them for this, they show explicitly where your workflow is coupled to another part in the workflow, so that if someone wants to change something, you have, instead of looking at code or some other UML, you have a very friendly way of looking at the information to see where that coupling is occurring, regardless of what kind of, code is running. Is that right?
If I have foreign keys, I have that in the model. So when I have a sticky note saying here's a to-do list item, and I have another sticky note that references onto that sticky note, then I would do it with IDs. So I have an ID, like in the table, I have an ID on an entity, and then the other sticky note then references. So that's nothing strange there. But yeah.
That's great. So in terms of the difference between a traditional event model, which is usually for event source systems, and this new event model for older systems, when new and old is reversed here, what in terms of the physical, how the board looks, do those yellow stickies kind of exist where the other events used to be, or do they exist where the commands used to be? What's the geographic location of these types of pieces of information?
It's really exactly the same, because I see this. I've seen the examples on your site, and I had a hard time with them because it takes too much time to really draw a table with all the fields below, and I don't want to have that. I just want to have a piece of information, and how that really looks in the table is nothing I want to discuss with my with the client. So it's he's able to know that, but do I really have to have 3 or 4 tables below it? They are really huge in size. And,
so they might take up too much room.
Yeah, right. And it's doesn't feel natural because all of those lines, and I just wanted to have one sticky note and move it around. So
okay, well, that's good. So we can probably adjust that, and I'm sure with more tooling like ONote and others, we can probably flip some views to transcribe those stickies to somehow explicitly show that coupling, that some field in one event is also used in a read model somewhere else. And so if you're talking about changes you can show the repercussions. And I think the reason I put those into these explicit tables is just to have a good starting place to show that each swim lane, very small swim lane, is the home to some piece of information. And if you go with your eyes all the way across, you can see if there's coupling to some other part.
For this example, it's perfect.
Mm-hmm.
If you have one table and in this table something changes all the time in a long story, then it would be the perfect example. But if you have a lot of tables, it might be confusing.
Yeah, it might be too much. So it definitely needs an electronic format, not just a drawing, so that if you're looking at an area where a lot of obviously the unrelated entities and table rows and values are having no changes, well, they shouldn't have any real estate because they're just making it hard to read. They should be collapsed and moved out of the way as soon as possible. So this is a very interesting area that I think will get developed as the tooling starts to get built for looking at systems like this, because you want to have a fast way to show that coupling. It's kind of like how in code you have with dependency management, and you can follow values. I think JetBrains IDEs have a follow value navigation. So if you go into a parameter, you can drill down to how far that value through whatever variables gets passed down. You can see in the abstract syntax tree how far that goes to the actual database call at the bottom or something like this. So you can imagine the same kind of analysis tooling to be available for the information level, which is business friendly, not just for coders to see how far a value has traveled and what other pieces are impacted by this change. So it's wonderful that you've found a shortcut through needing to do this for yourself and show that coupling in a manageable way that's actually quite low fidelity. Like it can be done with actual stickies on the wall if you want, which is nice, because I can't imagine drawing a line for every entity or every row and every column in a exercise on some paper. That doesn't work. So it's nice to see that the events and the same format still works for traditional systems, and you can still show those particular ones. So what would exactly, you're talking almost as if those events in a traditional system end up almost being just the SQL statement equivalents. Is that right? Or do they not? Or do they map more? Like, so if I was to insert something, it would literally that sticky note that you put in would be more or less the same information that you would have in the insert statement.
Yeah, that's right. So, but I do not even think on an insert statement.
That's right.
I'm thinking about what is really in my table, but
right.
It's nearly the same here, right?
Yeah, you're making sure that you don't have the technical aspects get in the way, because if you said something like insert statement, you would all of a sudden lose the audience from your business side, because you'd be using some dialects of SQL and other reserved words that business people don't really have experience with.
Maybe I can say it so. Isn't it a form of abstraction if I just write the pieces of information that I want to persist, but not how I persist them? Just I'm having my aggregate down there. So, but the persistence is abstracted from that. How do I persist an aggregate? So it does the repository does it.
Right.
But the state of it, that's what I keep down on the bottom.
Right.
Does it make sense?
Yeah, I think so. I think it means I'm not sure if I have a problem with the word abstraction, because I think it's a loaded term that allows you to put in other concepts that make the information easier to understand. What you're doing is you're removing the unnecessary translation, because, like you said earlier, it's about the information. And in my mind, when I'm using a system, I know what information I'm typing in on the keyboard, and when I press submit, I know that represents a concept in my mind that's quite nicely represented with exactly what I put in as the information. So moving away from concepts like abstraction, even if when you say the word abstraction, that itself might actually not be well understood by by business people. So, but information is information, which is kind of the lowest level, base level that's still useful to talk in terms of. And I think that's what you're getting at. Now, for the other side, when you're trying to show information, the views, they're obviously then not select statements. They're in the same spirit. They're just a collection of pieces of information that are going to be populating that screen or report or whatever you're doing, right?
Yeah, but what I see with the green views stickies is I see it as a query on my database.
That's right.
So it's just a query. And when I explain it to my other developers, then they get it. They know that somehow here is a query. It doesn't matter how complex it is. Maybe it is a very complex query that makes a lot of joins and has very, very long tables, or it's a very simple one. So, but somehow I can name that query and know, okay, I have to query my existing data there. And
right.
It's not, I have to admit, it's not as natural as with event sourcing. I think it's not as logical.
Mm-hmm.
You really listen for specific events, and that's your read model.
Mm-hmm.
But I think as long as it helps us, it's okay.
Yeah, it's interesting when people get introduced to event sourcing and see the advantages of just how clear the information is, because you're really running an audit log that you're working off of. Then you compare that to the traditional side, which is really every time you do any kind of change, you must think ahead and worry about foreign keys and worry about all of these, the impact right away. So it can be quite intimidating, especially as the system grows larger. Your velocity decreases because you're more and more scared of needing to look at more and more tables that could possibly use that same row that you're going to insert into, right? And with event sourcing, you don't have that problem. You push that. It's I always say it's the agony for your architecture, because the thing that 100% is that you captured this information, this fact happened, and then you let all the other views of that information worry about the transformations when they need to, if they're interested. So it sounds kind of I guess it's a big mental change for a lot of people when they're going from one to the other. But once they see the advantage of being able to pursue state changes with the same velocity that they had on day one as they do on 6 months down the road into the project, that they still have the same confidence to accept commands and allow the system to get input in a responsible way, so that they don't have to worry about just how large things grew. And then you still worry about it, of course. I mean, it's still a concern where that information is going to be used, but at least that part is a separate task, and that is also federated into that. And I guess with the event model, you have an ability to see just how large that impact is ahead of time, so that when people write that event to the event stream, they are happy that at least they have an accountability for, well, that's going to impact 10 read models, but that's okay. I know that either myself or other team members are going to help me, and they also looked at this map to see what that impact is going to be, and that they're okay with it. It's not something that I have to, look over my shoulder. I guess with Agile, we kind of, with the sprints and just that short-term thinking, we don't really have the time to do that analysis and be able to, to think, like you said in the beginning, past the sprint and look, further down the line, so that even though some of those read models may not be in our backlog for another 3 months, I know that we've done the due diligence to show the impact and how that coupling is going to affect us 3 months down the road. So what we're doing, I guess, is a small design up front, and instead of a big design up front, which is part of Agile's way of, going forward, because they, just for people's background, the traditional development before Agile was this bad take on waterfall, where you design a system for a year or 6 months, and you would get into the minutia of how things were done and how the classes were structured. That was seen as very important. And I think it allowed Agile to take off, because the trade-off is just don't do it, take that whole year back and actually use that whole year to develop and make it reactive and adjust, and then you'll get something sooner that's much better because of this long design. So we have small design.
I think when what's one of the best things about event modeling is its simplicity. So in the first place, for some people it's still confusing, even though there are only 4 boxes and 4 patterns. Right. But in the situation I'm now, so last year I really wished to use event modeling with the team, but there was this skepticism. But this year we have a very, very tight deadline, and so I said we have to use event modeling for that, because we now have to look into the future half a year from now. And are we ready? Are we really complete then? And I think I cannot estimate that without event modeling. I have to see the information from A to Z. And so today we did a 3-hour event modeling workshop, and
oh, wow.
even last weekend, I think I have convinced the team to see the value here.
Oh, that's great. So that's 3 hours in total, or is that one of many sessions? Because sometimes large systems can take up to 5 days or more in total.
Yeah, that's one of the large sessions. So last weekend, so we were doing it constantly. So yeah.
And it is still a traditional system. So you're finding that you don't need to teach people any concepts from event sourcing or CQRS or domain-driven design. You can still get the same goals, sort of, without having to teach them all of those things.
I think the first hour or so, it was quite silent, and I was the only one moving around boxes.
Mm-hmm.
But then really quickly the questions came, and I was only the moderator then. And
oh, that's good.
Yeah. So
that's one of the trickiest things, is that the workshops aren't really workshops if you're the only one working. You have to have the others help out.
It was really,
which is good. It's better than a meeting, right? People listening to one person talk for 2 hours, and then everyone else has got their hands tied; they can't participate. So maybe you can contrast that with maybe how how does the workshop format differ from traditional meetings? Because even then, we had planning sessions in Agile and this kind of stuff. How is the mechanics different?
The right questions come up very quickly. So if I model something and it's wrong, and there's a small mistake in it, or something, somebody knows something better, then immediately he will say that. And so we are on to the right topics in those meetings. And I've even though it was 3 hours, I have a feeling of a really, really good understanding now that I hadn't before. So it was very good and invested time.
Right.
And with other meetings, I don't know, sometimes there are meetings and I don't have that feeling.
Yeah, I remember lots of those. So it's really important in your company to have that estimate done. Are you able to translate that to a velocity for your developers to sort of give an idea of not just whether it's timeline, but also if the budget is correct, if the team size is correct? How far along that magical place where we can get into, traditional engineering estimates and those kind of movements? Are you further along with that? Were you able to, how far did you actually move the plus or minus on the estimate for the whole project?
Oh, you mean if I would have an estimate without that event model?
Yeah, compare it to previous projects that you worked on. And how, maybe just for reference, how large is the project? How many people are working on it, and is it a year or two? Oh, we got We lost the connection, unfortunately. Let's just see if we can get that back.
No, looks like he's, yeah.
Okay, well, let me just contact him. We lost him on Zoom.
I can put on the Jeopardy music.
No, that's okay. We can talk about, how your weekend was and how
Wow.
Rob's weekend was.
I mean, I ate pancakes. It was
That's
quite
good.
something.
Yeah, pancakes are good.
It had the associated event model, the pancake flipping, pancake flipped. We were well into it.
Yeah. That's good. So I didn't have pancakes. I tried a Jamie Oliver recipe for yam-based muffins. So they're kind of breakfast muffins, but they also have chili peppers. As you know, I'm a big chili pepper fan.
They would also be a little sweet.
Yes, they are. So it's kind of interesting. So you get the sweet with a little bit of a bite from that, but you make them with eggs and other things. It's essentially a muffin that's a little bit more eggy and a little bit more spicy. So it's interesting. You can just you don't have to have them in muffin format. You can have them in
any format.
It's kind of like a cake thing. You can just
like
slice off, and it's really delicious. It's really good. I'm gonna have it for lunch today because there's enough for a couple of days. So let's see if we can get.
I made something with ice cream, milk, and Oreo cookies that tasted pretty good in a blender.
Let's just see. Maybe they had a power outage. I hope there was no power outage. Oh, there he is. So remember, we were talking about the size of team and the estimate. So, hello, Sebastian. You had a bit of a connection issue.
Yeah, I somehow lost my internet connection for a moment, I think.
No problem. Well, we can just pick up from where we left off in terms of, again, just to answer so people understand how large this project is. And how many people, for how long, and what you traditionally would be able to estimate versus how far now you can estimate.
Yeah, the project I just talked about with our event modeling session is about half a year with 4 developers now.
Mm-hmm.
But it's a long-running project, so even after that we are working. But when I was doing apps, so the apps are a bit smaller. So I think event modeling, I'm still figuring out if it would make sense to use event modeling with a small app. I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of times, even with small projects, I find there was an interesting discussion that I had with about, not with Scott, but I did a Hansel Minutes with Scott. We didn't discuss that then, but Scott Hanselman had an interesting take on people just not knowing where to start and being overwhelmed with all the frameworks, with all of the tooling and things like this. So the event model tries to give you, for some people, even for a small project, a bunch of arrows to follow so that you kind of can, start with something meaningful, but then see and walk those lines to what to do next. So sometimes you might start with something silly like a login or registration, but quickly move into the actual use of the system, but be able to do that. So it's an interesting question because it comes up. So would you say that you have to have a certain size of a project before event modeling is worthwhile to look at?
I wouldn't say that because it's just so simple to start. If you have the ability to do an event modeling and understand the concept, then if you have a small project and only have 8 boxes on it, so that's not a lot of effort, right? So
yeah, exactly.
Why not using it? But then you know that it's not that complex. But
yeah, I guess it's a window into complexity because maybe someone says a few words that make the project sound simple, but you take a half an hour to draw something and you're wondering why, if it's a small project in half an hour, you're still not finished drawing the event model. So that might be a good litmus test for, sizing a project. If it's getting a little bit too, a little bit too much work to start to event model it, maybe people were trying to pass through a large project under the budget of a small one, which is happens a lot in software, I think.
Yeah, we are used to doing fixed price project at Noista, so it's.
Oh wow! So this is critical.
Clients love to do fixed price projects, and in my early days, I didn't put a lot of effort into the estimates, and that was not a good situation for me. So I was. It can lead to a not so happy customer. So
yeah.
And
yeah, we do the same thing. So we have to, we do the same exact thing. But we use event modeling to drive the fixed cost aspect, so that clients have an assurance that they're not going to overspend, and they're not going to wait too long for certain things. So I hope it's a trend in the industry overall that we continue to move things to be fixed price if we have estimates we can rely on. So there's this, maybe with Agile, the value of estimates was really discouraged and moved to the side. But there's a risk, especially when you're doing, especially with fixed price, obviously.
That's normal in our company. So we are used to doing a good estimate, and
because you probably use the same stack, right? For most of your projects, if you're doing mostly apps, you're going to have a RESTful API in the back end. You're going to have, iOS, Android. Do you use something that is common for both, or do you do native iOS and native Android?
Mostly native, but Flutter is on the rise.
Yeah, I heard about Flutter last year. And so you're switching to Flutter, or just starting some projects?
A lot of projects are switching to Flutter, but I think we are looking for more developers. It's hard to find new Flutter developers.
Yeah, I have a really good one in Vancouver. He's been using Flutter since the very beginning. So yeah, we can probably chat after if you want to use him for anything. But at least what's nice about the fixed cost. If you can find someone that wants to learn Flutter, you can say, like what we do with the slices. You can say, if you can do this in Flutter, each slice pays whatever euros. But if you're just learning, that slice might take you a week because you're just learning Flutter. But then when they're good, that one slice might take them only a day. So their compensation goes up because they're doing more slices in a limited amount of time. At the same time, the company de-risked the fact that there's not enough Flutter developers by allowing people to learn Flutter on the job, but it's not at the expense of the project, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah, but we are in Germany here. I don't think it's that easy for us here to have such a dynamic income.
Oh, so I mean, you could probably work with another company to be the consulting company to buy those slices from them as a product, right? And sometimes, at least in North America, I'm not sure if it's the same thing in Germany, but you could have a contract to hire or have a deal with another company that they will give you this person once you're happy that they're doing the Flutter work in enough time. The slices aren't taking too long. You can then switch them and hire them. But it's interesting, and I like the fact that your company does a lot of apps, because the whole UX UI part of event modeling is quite nice, that you can see exactly what the screens are going to be, and you can dovetail this into the effort with the designers, so that the flow of how the screens go from left to right, like the storyboarding that designers do, is 100% pluggable to the event model, which is what architects use, which allows you to then be quite you have one canvas for all those roles, which is kind of something we didn't do before. I think
I've shown that event model to one of our designers, and she was getting it in the first moment what I was doing there, and she's also used to work like that with the missing part at the bottom of the event model, but all of the wireframes. That's something she's really used to.
No, that's great. Yeah, because I don't think every time I worked with a company that had enough design in there, that whole department of designers was used like a vendor. You know, you'd go at the front and say, I want this designed, and then you'd wait and wait. It would not be very collaborative. You know, maybe some people would have a meeting or an email back and forth here and there, but it wasn't very collaborative. It was like a store. You would buy your design. Even within the same company, you could feel there was a wall between the two sides of the company. But I think if we have a better format like we do with event modeling, then you do have a natural way for someone to look at an event model and say, hey, this is a storyboard. I understand that as a designer. This is a storyboard, and I can put all my material in here if I want. Right. So maybe we'll have more tools.
She uses that this way and brings designs into that and her suggestions. And they are not just designers, they are user experience experts.
Exactly.
Right? And they need to change the story sometimes when they see something would make sense.
That's an interesting thing to get to, because sorry for interrupting, but a lot of people, I think, still have a hard time making the distinction between a designer and the user experience person. How in your company do those roles, change?
I think it's by person. We have a large design team in our Neuster Mobile company, and it went from one person to, I think now, I have to lie, I don't know, 15 persons.
Oh wow!
So in the apps, it's really important to have a good design. It's a key,
of course,
ability to have that, and not so much in all the other companies, but we really needed it, and it improved our quality a lot. So we have a large design team, and I don't know if they decide, if they make any I have not the right words.
Well, if they, so let's go back.
Yeah.
We can go back to the question in terms of people. People kind of have an idea of what UX is. People say it has better user experience, but a lot of times that gets put onto the side of the designers, which is just the UI mechanics. Do they, in your company, you have someone specifically that does UX versus someone specific that does, they do it together?
I think they have the ability to do both most of the times. Yeah.
Right. I guess from most people, they don't realize that those are two different perspectives on the system. The design is just, the visual pleasantness, if it's nice colors and things like this.
Yeah.
But the user experience is the flow of how you get from one step of your workflow to the next. If you're getting a notification, or if you're continually using the app, pressing buttons and interacting. And, what happens on a longer timeline when you have to come back to the app, because it might be some scheduling system where, someone doesn't use the app for 3-4 days and then has to come back later to use it again. Does the user have to remember too much from the last session, or is the information presented nicely again the next time they interact with the system so that people know where they left off?
What I almost forgot is that we're offering also workshops. We call it Design Sprint. And there are our designers and some other guys go to the client, and then they held I think it's 2 or 3 day workshop where they find out about what app does a client need and want, and if everything is unclear in the first place. So they do an impact mapping and a story mapping, and all these kinds of things. And at the end, there is a wireframe, and it's a quick way of getting an idea into example. It's quite similar to event modeling, I think.
Yeah, there's a lot of crossover. If you're doing other practices, those events or pieces of information in your system, you can see how they translate from the previous practices to the event model. And so I think you're starting to use the event model like a blueprint from the perspective of at least the development team. But slowly you're seeing that others are looking at this blueprint too. So that's good.
Yeah.
Well, it's been, we had 45 minutes. That's a good time for podcast. We can maybe do some questions and answers we have 8 people together participating. And I know Justin probably had some questions he was waiting to ask you, Stephen as well, and others, and Rob is here as well. So let's see if anyone has a question, and see what Sebastian's doing.
Yeah, I will do my best. I'm just struggling a bit with my English.
No, that's okay. Your English is fine. I always get that from German people. My English is horrible. It's like, what? Your English is better than half the people in Vancouver. Like, so we understand you perfectly, but so you must understand Vancouver is, Canada. All of Canada is pretty much made up of immigrants with accents from everywhere.
Then it's okay.
And so, especially in Vancouver, where you are way above any person that I walk into in the streets. There's areas in Canada where people don't speak English.
I have a question for him when you guys have
hey, Tim.
Hey, how's it going?
Hey.
So my question to you is, you mentioned that with the event model, you weren't really doing events. You had your data store and whatnot. You were kind of going through the story from that perspective. But was there pushback from your team or within the organization to not go with event-driven, knowing that going with event-driven approach and having inputs and outputs and state transitions, you can get to that copy and paste cadence that we keep talking about. Are you going to say that you won't be using event-driven in the future? Is there pushback within the organization? What is it, or are you using it?
No, it totally depends on the team and the client. So since we are a custom software development agency, we always listen to our clients, and it's always about we fit to everything that the client wants. And so in this case, event-driven is not an option right at the moment. And so, but I really, really, really wanted to use event modeling, and that there is a tight schedule this year. So I saw that this is the answer to this, and so I'm paid for doing high quality work, and I do all my best to use all the tools I know to deliver that. So I decided to just, sorry.
What was the reason given for not going with an event? Was it that it was an existing system? It was already, or it's a legacy system?
Legacy. It exists 3 years from now, I think, and it gets bigger and bigger, and so if I would,
there's no opportunity to change now, right?
Yeah. If I would start it fresh right now, I think I would try it and I would give it a try. But I'm new to this, so maybe it's my I'm not brave enough maybe to really step in and say, yes, now it doesn't matter, I will build it event driven. Maybe
We did that at the last company, and it was the first time I had ever done anything like that. And one thing that we learned a ton from it, and there's a lot of takeaways. So if you ever do end up going with something that's event driven, I can tell you just from my own experience, the do's and don'ts, the pitfalls, where things were good on that previous system and where they went wrong. So let us know.
Yeah, we're in the same boat. We do custom development too.
Yeah, I brought that topic up right after the workshop, and right within the workshop, I had a talk. But it's the same with event modeling. It takes a bit of time to really deeply understand all the concepts and play around with them, and maybe have a side project just trying out, maybe in a little to-do list app or something. And then
yeah, didn't you have you had a small project like that for it, right?
I've done
I think it was a to-do list that you had. I forget.
But it's really old. It was before I really understood DDD. So it was really while I understood DDD, I did this thing, and now I would really
you would do it differently.
yeah, of course. But
you can probably change it, right?
Yeah, that's the plan. But time is the problem.
Isn't it? It's for everyone.
Yeah.
And like we said, it's already been a whole year that passed since some of the interesting things happened since we were last able to meet in person. So time is flying. Hopefully everyone can get back to normal schedules soon.
What I really got interested in during the workshop was an idea to just start emitting events within a legacy project. So just start emitting events somewhere and store it in an event store, and that would be a start to go to event driven.
Right, that's always suggested if you want to.
Yeah, and that's the plan to.
So you will be moving to newer systems that are more mature to have the traceability, because I think people miss the big advantage of event sourcing is that built-in traceability, which allows you to fix problems very quickly and map your user stories directly to just the way that your user story word for word then is the set of events that happens. There's no real translation, and so when people love user stories and user story mapping and all this stuff about behavior driven and specification by example, the answer is right under their nose. It's the event driven approach that they can use all these very powerful practices and have them be mirrored directly in their solutions. It's a big advantage, and so I'm really happy to see that your company is starting to see and adopt the advantages of this missed opportunity. I think with traditional ways we have juggling too many things. From
to be honest, it's not the whole company yet, but I'm starting to bring it in and teach it to the colleagues someday. But for now, I think there are not a lot of people doing that event modeling.
Well, so that's good. I mean, that's also it's compatible with the traditional things. You're not changing the entire company. You don't need to. You can, like you said earlier, you can do this just for yourself to check your own work. But then everything that you do, it maps nicely to Jira system and sprint planning and user story mapping and user stories and whatever else that you have that everyone else is used to. Meanwhile, for yourself, you can quickly get through some answers, and like you said, bringing that blueprint to a meeting and say, I can point with my finger where we don't have the specifications done correctly yet is very powerful. Just allows people to align, I think, with what you said, that they they're able to talk about the part that maybe in a traditional meeting would get overlooked.
The traceability that you mentioned, Adam, is really good. That's what happened at the previous gig. They started to use the event store more and more for debugging purposes and tracing. And what you could end up with, Sebastian, is a lot of people championing for it down the road. And we found people starting to do that. They wanted it under other systems as well. They're like, how can I get these events in the other systems? So maybe the approach is to just start off emitting events and persisting them somewhere, so you can get like people that are in support or having to do debugging start to use it more and more, and then they'll just start to speak up more. They'll start saying, this is fantastic, we need to move forward with this. How do we do this? And then you get buy-in from other people.
If you build it, they will come.
Exactly.
And Tim brings up a good point about support. The traceability, the replayability, the fact that you know exactly what happened at exactly what time is invaluable to support. Oftentimes support is left guessing. They have to engage a lot of people, and they have to engage people that might not remember exactly what happened. They might not be able to paint a picture that's realistic enough to solve an issue or fix a bug. For example, you could have something that you could have an output of a report go wrong. It produces the wrong output. You could you don't have any real traceability with a traditional system. You just have the current state. After engaging a bunch of people, the requirements, the design, and everything, you still don't exactly know what happened. You could end up fixing the wrong thing. It gets you the right result on paper, but you might have broken like 4 other things at the same time. In that case, you're fixing 4 other bugs. Tim brings up probably what I think is one of the most valuable aspects of using events in general. You have the source of truth. People will simply end up relying on it more than anything else. They'll just come to you, right? So if you build it, they will come.
These are all good arguments, but if I bring up these arguments, I think these are just arguments, and I think the people have to see the advantage. And
that's it.
Yeah, they have to see it. They have to see that the projects that you're doing are easier to understand. They don't have a death march at the end. The involvement with the clients and other people, they're easier. So if you can't show that, then there's no reason to switch.
But that's really the next step. I think that's not too expensive, and to just play around. You don't change the behavior of the software if you just emit events, but that's just that can be just the first step then. Yeah? But
exactly, yeah.
Having an event store shouldn't be too expensive, I think.
No.
So it's by far cheaper than Microsoft SQL Server.
Yeah.
And so I don't see any disadvantage. So
yeah, exactly. And with as people get more, if they're moving, so this is another argument. We're not talking about event modeling. We're just talking about moving to event sourced at this point, which is a big jump for a lot of people. The fact that you can, if you get people to understand that, like we started at this podcast discussing some of the stream design disciplines, and if people are more used to designing streams, then you'll notice that you still have pretty much the same type of work that you're doing, except you have that traceability built in. So even if a lookup is done by looking directly at a stream, so be it. Those are still responsible shortcuts, because you're not losing information. So even if there's a mistake there, you can always rewrite your query to the events, or rewrite the materialized view of a projection of those events. So lots of opportunity. Now, any other questions for Sebastian? I know we had Rob unmuted, and a few others that came in. So we don't want to keep, I know it's evening, and Sebastian has a young child and family to take care of, so we don't want to keep him either. I want to make sure we spend another maybe 5-10 minutes tops, and then I think we have a good episode.
Yeah, I really appreciate the insight you have there, Sebastian. Coming from like our last gig, we call it all the time, where Tim, especially, and Rob had to battle to get them on board with the event sourcing sort of aspect of the system. And it's nice to hear that different perspective of the challenges that you're dealing with, and how you've made inroads, at least. So hopefully you can continue doing that, because it's
I think
Yeah.
it's a good approach. I think just emitting events and persisting them is a good start, and getting the other teams to be able to use them for tracking bugs and fixing bugs. That's perfect.
One other thing you might find too is that if you can even do an event model session at a lunch and learn, sometimes that gets a huge amount of buy-in. Just getting
Yeah, lunch and learns are good,
getting
especially
people
if
in
you
the
have a bit
room
of an
to start
exercise,
talking.
right?
Yeah, you get
Yeah.
people in the room, they start talking, and they start going, "Oh, now I see how this could all tie together."
Can you repeat that? Lunch and what?
Yeah, lunch and learns, like they're usually called brown bag lunches. It's, I guess mostly
Bring a sandwich.
English thing. Yeah, so like using your lunch hours, a lot of companies will have, while you eat your lunch, you can just learn
Okay, yeah,
you
we
know,
have that
some
too, yeah.
concept, and someone in your company can bring in maybe they want to show user story mapping or something, or they want to show event modeling.
Yeah, we had
So they would
something
do an
called-
hour presentation, or they do a short presentation, maybe have a little exercise once everyone's finished
We had
eating.
some-
But it's essentially reusing your lunch hour. So how companies squeeze more time out of you for
right,
free learning.
right.
Be careful with that one.
We had
There-
something
just-
called a Friday breakfast Friday, and the people were having talks and listened to a talk, and they were able to have a breakfast while listening. But for some reason, if it got bigger and bigger, nobody brought breakfast there. So maybe we need to change that again.
Yeah. It's I mean, we used to do it as you know, because our company kind of focuses on event source systems as the way that we build them. And so a lot of times we would do brown bag lunches for other companies. So just for free, I would do a presentation for 45 minutes. So a company's team or set of teams could just listen and have a free kind of lesson on something, like maybe event sourcing, you know, or whatever. I even used to do that for Git when it wasn't as popular. Used to do brown bag lunches for learning source control through Git, and how it's different from Subversion or Visual Source Safe or other things. So
where do you get your energy from?
I don't know. I just I like teaching. I like moving. I'm impatient with the world. I want better approaches to be adopted quicker by companies, because I don't like you know, leaving the whole world in an immature state of tooling and practices. So if we can teach, then we move everything forward. So it's all tied together. I don't worry about anything. If I am writing a blog post, doing a podcast, doing a brown bag, it's always this, you know, the same focus for me to move things forward. So it's really the same work. I don't see it as extra work. It's just you know, how I choose to do. What's that?
I appreciate that. So it helped me. So,
no, I'm happy that you're getting value out of it, and you know, hopefully that continues to affect other people and they take advantage of it. And I think it's really important for people to hear from you on the podcast that this is, you know, reality. People are using better ways in different companies. They're, you know, refining their approaches. A big part of that is event modeling, even for, you know, these traditional systems. And I think it's more important, actually. Your case is more important because majority of the world is traditional systems. So you're going to have to use an event model without event sourcing, and you're going to have to be able to explain state over time, even independent of that approach. You have to understand that what Fred Brooks said is right. And like you mentioned him earlier, I can just imagine how different Fred Brooks' career would be if he was, you know, born later and was working right now, because, you know, that idea that state tells everything about the system. If he had the luxury of storing so much more for so little, right? Our storage is so cheap now compared to, you know, the 60s when he was working. It would be amazing to see how much further insight he would have on the Mythical Man Month and that view of state, which is
I
interesting.
got that book lately, and I think it's available as free PDF somewhere, and just had a look at it, and I wanted to find that.
Yeah, it's in there
find
somewhere.
it in the book, but I didn't find it. I think
it might be just his quote around the time that he was writing it. I think when someone uses that quote and they put his name beside it, he's best known for that book. So it's not necessarily that the quote is in the book, but it's like, this quote is by Fred Brooks, the author of Mythical Man Month, because that's how people will know which Fred Brooks we're talking about, because I'm sure Fred Brooks is not such an uncommon name in the West.
But it's still a lot to learn in that book, because he said a lot of things about estimating and
well, that's the whole thing about estimating.
Yeah.
So I wish he was, still doing a lot of work right now, but you only have one lifetime, and he paved the way to some of these insights. So yeah. So we got another 5 minutes tops here. So let's see, Rob, any questions for Sebastian? Anyone else? Jeff,
do you have to mention to the people that are there's about 7 or so watching right now on YouTube, just like and subscribe.
Yeah, like and subscribe.
You'll get the notification next time we go live. It's
every Monday we'll have that. So okay, I guess there's not any other questions. No. Well then,
it was good seeing Sebastian again from our last workshop. He was one of our star students. So nice to hear that.
Thank you very much.
Nice to hear that event modeling is working for you. You're more engaged, but I had a Raspberry Pi die last night, and I hate to admit it, but I've been sitting here rebuilding it.
Oh, nice. I have a lot of Raspberry Pis at home too.
Yeah, this one has been a pleasure.
Yeah. Oh, thank you very much.
It was nice. What's your vision in a year? In 1 year, what do you want to see happen?
I like to work on an event source system in a year, I think.
See, that's why our company is different, because we created the company for that sole purpose, for people to have a place to work only on the event source system.
Yeah, I know that. I heard that. Yeah, but you're in Canada.
Well, there's no borders now, right? It doesn't matter.
Yeah, that's right.
Without borders, it's where we're at.
Yeah. It's like we discussed earlier. There is no borders anymore. It's all about, just as long as you can work with another time zone, that's okay. And some of the specifications through event modeling are much more clear. So I've never had a problem with remote people. I worked with people in India and other places, as long as you're doing, you have a system that you're following, and that's highly transparent and has good feedback mechanisms and a good quality bar. You shouldn't really care where the work is done. If you can't work remotely with other time zones, it's probably an indication of other issues. And so before any of this, even before event sourcing, I had very successful teams all the way in India too, and all over the world. So
maybe we need to stay in contact then.
Yes, but, absolutely.
I think that's what we have with COVID anyway. So working remotely,
it's forcing the issue. So people have to address the true problems of not being able to work remotely. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, just as a reminder for everyone, then the workshop is coming up on this Thursday. So 3 days or so left. I think it's almost filled up. There's quite a few people for this week. So get a hold of me if there's a problem with registration or anything like that. But I hope to see everyone there, and that's interested and if you have any issues signing up, let me know. Our Friday meetup, because of the workshop, is going to be delayed until the workshop is finished, which won't be much of a delay. And so the Friday one will be a public meetup that we usually do, but it'll have the participants from the workshop joining us, and hopefully play some games and do something fun and relaxing at the end of a very busy week, and with lots of learning, maybe discuss some event sourcing or event modeling concepts, play some trivia, play some games, and have a really fun Friday. I think everyone's going to need that after the we're well into 2021 trying to get things started. People might need a little break. So again, Sebastian will have contact information for you if people want to get a hold of Sebastian. We'll have all of that in the show notes, and he can share further information with you of how it's going and his unique perspective on how to do event modeling with traditional systems, which is a very key part of the next chapter as we move people into better approaches. I'm happy to hear that event modeling is showing that it's a nice bridge between different departments, different approaches, and doing that. So Sebastian, thank you again for taking the time. I know you're busy with family and work, etc., but it's we all appreciate your time and you sharing your story with us.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, and it's always fun to talk about these topics, so it was a pleasure.
Yeah, excellent. So we'll see you online. We'll see you at the next workshops, and have a wonderful evening, and see you online.
Yeah, bye.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.